Willkommen bei Fahrradio. Ich bin Hans und ihr hört eine Interviewfolge. Und nicht nur das. Zum Interview gibt es ein Gewinnspiel auf Instagram. Schaut einfach auf unseren Account und macht mit. Ich habe mit Oliver Knight über sein neues Buch gesprochen, für das er gerade bei Kickstarter ein Crowdfunding gestartet hat. Das Buch heißt Pro Cycling Style und beschäftigt sich auf 200 großformatigen Seiten mit der Geschichte und der Kultur rund um das Fahrradtrikot im Radrennsport. Wenn ihr jetzt sagt, Fahrradtrikots, das ist ja wirklich ziemlich abwegig, dann rate ich euch, gebt ihm eine Chance. Hört einfach mal rein. Oliver hat eine Menge super interessanter Dinge zu erzählen, die auch Nicht-Radsport-Fans interessieren können. Den Link zu seinem Projekt findet ihr in den Shownotes und passend dazu verlosen wir bei Instagram ein signiertes Exemplar seines ersten Buches The Cycling Jersey. Geht einfach auf unseren Account bei Instagram und macht mit. Das Interview ist in englischer Sprache. Ich denke aber, es sollte ganz gut zu verstehen sein. Ich wünsche euch viel Spaß. Jetzt geht's los. Thanks for being on our podcast.
Thank you.
Maybe you could just introduce yourself with in a couple of sentences before I try to do it.
Okay, sure. My name is Oliver Knight. I'm from London, but I live in Paris. I started an Instagram account called Three Back Pockets around 3-4 years ago. And then from there, that's grown into me producing books on the subject. I started off as a collector of cycling jerseys. And from those, I got very interested in the history behind them. And that naturally evolved into what Three Back Pockets is today.
Naturally evolved.
Oh.
Yeah, like many people are doing books on bicycle jerseys.
Well, for me, it was an organic process because I was born in 1978, and the jerseys that I collect come from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I never got to see them at the time. But I've always been interested in vintage clothing. And I started to find these vintage cycling jerseys in France, in Paris, because they're quite easy to come across. There were lots that were produced in France. And I just came under the spell of these jerseys, made from wool with the chain stitching or acrylic with the flocking. And from there, I started collecting them. I had 20, then I had 30, then I had 50. And I said to myself, these are beautiful objects. I really want to photograph them. I'm a professional photographer for the last 20 years. So I took these jerseys and borrowed a mannequin and put them on a mannequin in the studio, photographed them. And then I said, well, I want to share these pictures, these gorgeous jerseys. So I started the Instagram calling it Three Back Pockets because all the jerseys have 3 back pockets. And it just sort of took off from there. I was amazed at the response. I had cycling fans reaching out to me, collectors. Then the manufacturers started getting in touch with me, people like Santini, Castelli, because I had pieces that they themselves didn't have in their archive. And it just sort of grew from there. And now I'm at around just under 5,000 followers. Bringing out the book was the first book called The Cycling Jersey, was quite a natural step because I had the links with the ex-pro riders, the collectors and the manufacturers. So it was quite a natural organic process. It grew really, organically.
Yeah, but I have the book in front of me. It is not available anymore, is it?
Well, the story of the book is an interesting one because I was originally approached by a publisher to produce it. So I said, okay. So I went off traveling around Europe, meeting people to get the content. I finished the book, handed the manuscript over to the publisher, and they had some problems with their kind of the parent publisher, the sort of the head of the group. So the book found itself in a kind of kind of a legal no man's land for around 6 months. The publishing rights were kind of in the kind of no man's land, and I eventually got the publishing rights returned to myself. So I then went and did a Kickstarter campaign to produce the book, because the people on my Instagram had followed the voyage of this book, and then it was really nice to then turn around and say to them, well, look, you've seen this book being created, now we can produce it together. And the Kickstarter model was a really nice one, because people could really show their support. And I printed 1,000 copies of the first book, and that sold out within 12 months. I was invited to do book launches in London, Paris, Amsterdam, Dusseldorf, where I met you, New York as well, Warsaw. And I said to myself, well, there are still interesting stories to be heard, to be told. So I decided to produce the new book, which is called Pro Cycling Style. And that's essentially a volume 2 of the first book. But when I come to print the second book, I am going to reprint copies of the first book, because there's still a big demand for that title as well.
Yeah, and it doesn't get old, so it's not as short-lived as some other books. So the stories in the book are still interesting.
Sure. I mean, the first book was essentially an introduction to the cycling jersey. So I look at the roots of how the cycling jersey came to be. They were first produced in Italy by Vittorio Gianni, who was producing sportswear for AC Milan. He was also producing sportswear for, activewear for the Milan Ballet. And the cycling jersey, when it was first made, it was quite a rudimentary object. They settled on wool because it was the best all-purpose material. Back then, stages of races were a lot longer. So you'd be starting a stage at 4 or 5 in the morning when it would be cold, and then during the day it would be hot. So they settled on wool, especially merino wool, as that was the best material. And then the evolution of the object is really interesting. As the sport grew and evolved, you then had sponsor branding that got introduced to the jerseys. Then there were advances in the material technology. So polyester came in, then lycra. Then they became aware of aerodynamics. I talked to jersey designers at Castelli that are really pushing the envelope in terms of the jersey as an ergonomic piece rather than an aesthetic piece, right up to today, where you've got Castelli producing their speed suits using dimpled fabric technology, which is designed to cut down drag. I mean, the cycling jersey now has really come of age. Before, it was just something that was designed to differentiate different teams and stand out and show the team sponsorship. But now it's become a sort of an integral piece of racing equipment in its own right. When people became aware of aerodynamics in the late 80s, early 90s, that's when the cycling jersey really came of age. So as an object, it's a fascinating object. And the second book, I wanted to look more at the aesthetics, which are the classic designs, which are the ones that really left their mark, which were the most stylish riders. So the second book is an extension of the first book, but it kind of goes a little bit deeper. It's more looking at the jersey. The book's going to start with a quote from Paul Formel, which basically says, to look good is already to go fast. So having a jersey which you feel great in, that gives you a psychological advantage, or it can intimidate your opponent. So I find that fascinating. And there are pro riders that I've talked to that totally back up this point of view, that if you're with a team that has a fantastic design, you have an advantage, and vice versa. If you're wearing a jersey which you're kind of being laughed at wearing, that can have a negative effect. So it's an interesting, it's a huge subject. It really is.
I can totally relate to that, actually, because when I was small, I was riding BMX, and I needed a factory jersey.
Oh, absolutely.
This was essential.
Absolutely.
So I wasn't I wasn't in a team, and it was an amateur team. So it wasn't like road cycling, but it's something I spend all my money on getting the correct dress, like the
Sure,
pros wrote
sure,
in the magazines I was looking
sure.
at.
Well, what's interesting is especially within Italy, the cycling jersey was part of, menswear within a wider context. For example,
Mm-hmm.
if you were a pro at the top of your game, such as Tom Simpson, Jacques Anquetil, you had your team jersey, but you didn't wear the normal standard team jersey. You went to Vittorio Gianni in Milan and you had your personal jersey custom made by Vittorio Gianni. And if you had that label, that was almost like a sign to say, well, I've arrived, I'm really kind of at the top table in terms of pro cycling. So the cyclists were very fussy, very fussy. I talked with John Eustace, who was captain of the first ever US registered team sponsored by Gianni Motta. And he talked about racing in Italy in the mid 80s. And, you couldn't turn up to the Giro with a dirty bike. You couldn't turn up with dirty socks. You had to have brand new white bar tape on your handlebars every day. You had to have your cap worn just right. They were really, really fussy. He describes the riders as peacocks. They wanted to look good. They wanted to show off, and I think that's fantastic. It's cycling style, but within a wider context. And I mean, on my Instagram, I don't just have cycling fans following me. I have a lot of menswear people following me, graphic designers, typographers. I mean, the jerseys, they're really like little time capsules for great design. What was the great design in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s? One jersey design which has stood the test of time is the Renault Elf jersey, which is the black and yellow diagonal jersey. And that simply came from the Renault logo, which was a piece of graphic art designed by Victor Vasarely in the 1960s. So, the jerseys, they're kind of, they're within design, within a much wider context, and what I'm interested in is what makes one design stand out, what separates one from another. And in the new book, I've talked with designers at Rafa, Santini, Castelli, De Macchi, and it's an interesting question. What makes the Molteni jersey stand the test of time? It's interesting.
What I think I remember when we met in Düsseldorf, you told me about how the different designers didn't really get along with each other very well. So did I remember that right? That one of them, when they heard you talk to the others, they were a bit well, not upset, but they didn't really like to be featured in the same
essentially
book.
within the first book. I mean, I had great support from Castelli. They invited me to be there, and I also had great support from Rafa. And there was a little bit of animosity, not animosity. Rafa's the brand that people kind of love to hate because they're kind of the new kids on the block. They've done, Simon Mottram, he did some genius branding because it was a new brand, but they basically built their whole brand on heritage, and they're a brand that doesn't have any. So the name Rafa is the nickname for the San Rafael team, which was the cycling team in France in the 50s and 60s, with riders like Rudy Altig and Jacques Anquetil. And if you put the Rafa logo next to the Campagnolo logo, you'll see that they're exactly the same typeface. So Simon Mottram was very clever. He created a brand which was named after the nickname of a very well-known French cycling team from the 1960s, and he used the same typeface as the best-known brand of cycling components from Italy. So in terms of sort of semiotics, you look at the Rafa logo, and in your mind, you are thinking about Campagnolo, you're thinking about the cycling teams from the 1960s. So, yeah, I mean, but Rafa do a great job. I mean, they've got great designers. In the first book, I talked with Ulton Coyle, who was behind the Canon cycling kit, which was a groundbreaking bit of design. I talked with Alex Waldman, who, he's the head of design, fantastic designer. And in the new book, I talked with Angelo Truffa, who very interesting designer. He comes from a football background, but he's produced some great bits of kit. So, I'm interested to kind of, essentially these designers, they're people that are making the sort of future iconic jerseys, so I'm interested to hear about their influences, their references. And, what goes around comes around, there's nothing really new in terms of design, I remember interviewing Alex Vordman, and he talked to a jazz musician and asked him about how he approaches and how he creates his art. And he said, well, I just take, 90% of what I do is things that I love from the past, and I just put 10% of myself on top of it. So I think that's behind all great design. You just kind of use things which have worked in the past and then give them a new twist, and it's something people respond to it,
I'm sure you know the rules.
Sure.
Do you? So as earlier you talked about like the Italians being peacocks. So is that something? This is still a thing on road cycling, or so you have to. There are some either outspoken or not outspoken rules that you have to follow. Is that still like that?
Well, I think there's less because the cycling kit has become such a kind of scientific bit of equipment. There's less room for kind of individuality. I mean, the riders back in the sort of 70s and 80s, they could wear the cap how they wanted. They could have their own sort of Swiss wristwatch. They could have their jersey custom made by Vittorio Gianni rather than the team issue kit. And the kit today, it's essentially like a skin tight piece of equipment. I mean, John Eustace referred to it as being like the skin of a racing car, So I think there's less room for individuality. Also, I find it's a lot harder to see the riders because they've all got these kind of wraparound helmets and dark glasses. It's quite difficult to differentiate them unless they're wearing the colours of national world champion. There are exceptions, of course. I mean, Sagan is totally Contador. They really know how to kind of put on a good show. But rules in terms of aesthetics, I mean, you've got to have your kind of tan lines nice and crisp. But in terms of an individual look, I don't think there's as much of that today, which I guess, is a bit of a pity. But it's cycling has become essentially Formula One now. I mean, people are looking to try and get advantages any way they can to come first. So maybe it's become a bit more not sterile, but a bit more sort of scientific, and there's less room for panache and flair. I'm not sure. I mean, but the one thing that is for sure is that people have always got an opinion about these jerseys from the 70s and 80s. Everyone's got their favourite. Everyone's got the design that stands out for them. And I don't see many designs from this era that really have that same sort of longevity. I don't know which ones will stand the test of time. We'll see.
So what's your favorite jersey then?
I think for me, my favorite has to be the Brooklyn team jerseys, because I mean, essentially, it's such a weird.
Could you describe
jersey,
them?
It's basically the American flag. It's the stars and stripes. So and there was Roger de Vlaeminck, Patrick Circle on the team, probably the two best known riders. What's interesting about that jersey is essentially the sponsor was a brand of chewing gum, an Italian brand of chewing gum. And the owner, George Perfetti, essentially during the Second World War, there were lots of American troops stationed in Italy. And, American culture was seen as quite exotic and by the locals. And one of the biggest traits of the Americans is chewing gum. So all of a sudden, post-war, chewing gum became very popular. So George Perfetti saw a gap in the market, started producing this chewing gum to sell to the Italian market. He called it Brooklyn to capitalize on the fact that it was American. used English in the adverts, and then he decided he wanted to expand the brand and sponsored a cycle team. He approached Geos. Geos painted the bikes blue to match the branding of the gum, and to really hammer home the message of his American product for the team cycling jersey, he had the stars and stripes. So you had Belgian riders cycling, all over Europe, wearing the American flag. It's kind of a crazy mix. They're essentially dressed like Captain America, but they're so far removed from America. But it just kind of worked. It's the design that stands out, and I think Roger de Vlaeminck has a lot to do with the longevity of this jersey, because he was a very stylish rider. He had the sideburns and the good looks, but it could be argued the Brooklyn jersey is a bit of a blunt object, but it just works so well. And I think it's not the design that's great; it's because the American flag is a great design. Essentially, that's what's behind it.
Yeah, it has something bold.
Yeah, it's unapologetic. It's brash, and I mean, it stands out. I mean, it makes the right. You have Captain America, so you associate these riders with being like a superhero. I think that's what the cycling jersey can do. It can raise the profile of these riders to more than mere mortals. They become, in a way, it becomes their suit of armor. It becomes their crest. It becomes their flag. They stand for something.
Actually, I have to once again come back to what I experienced, because I never rode bikes, and last year I was invited to the Giro to ride it was called Giro E. So it was a parallel race to the Giro d'Italia, but on e-bikes. And I wasn't very fit, and it actually was the first time I rode. I had because I was mountain biking before most of the time, and the kind of clothes you wear mountain biking is more loose and more like a casual look. And then I had to get kit, and I raced with the Team Italia, so the Italian tourist board sponsored a team, and I was part of them. And they gave me this jersey, and it was a tight fit, and actually it felt I felt faster in this jersey. So it transformed me a bit. So especially when it was the Giro is in spring. So it wasn't really that warm, but it was it was a slight a light warm wind that that went over you. So you, or when you were when I was in the peloton, I felt the drag of the others. I felt, and when I opened the zipper of the jersey, I thought, whoa, I have to put it back on again, back up again, because I'm faster.
I mean, the first book I talked with Maria Teresa Castelli, who's a textile designer who works with Castelli. Just happens to be a kind of a quirk of fate that have the same surname. But she basically was telling me that she's worked with a lot of brands, Moncler and people like that. And she says that, the advances in cycling kit, they're so far advanced, they then go on to influence other sports. So the technology that's used in cycling kit first will then go on to be used in sailing wear, in ski wear, golf wear even, The cycling jersey is an incredibly technically advanced sport, and the riders that they're not afraid of new technology.
Okay, so any thoughts about the bit? About the cycling shorts?
Yeah, I mean, well, as long as they're black, I think it's okay. We're going to that debate. I mean, most interesting story I've heard is Castelli They were sponsoring the Hunved Botekia team in the mid-80s Giro. And because dye sublimation had kind of made its advances, they realized they could have colored cycling shorts. So they had the team turn up to the start with the black shorts on, but underneath they had the colored shorts, which were turquoise to match the cycling jersey. And just before the stage started, they took off their black shorts to reveal the colored shorts underneath. And throughout the whole stage, the cameras were on this team. And of course, he got fined because only black shorts were allowed. But he didn't care because the cameras were on the team throughout the whole stage. You went on to sell a load of product. So I think that, there's essentially, it can be a bit of a publicity stunt, I think. I just think, some subtle branding on the shorts is fine. But I think the jersey itself is where there should be the colour and the detail. That should make the impact. If you start having the shorts as well, it can kind of clash. For me, the jersey is the painting and the shorts are the frame. So I think, to have black shorts is fine. Unless, but then you have people like Cipollini who have these fantastic zebra skin suits and tigers. I think it depends on the character of the rider. But sometimes I think less is more,
So you're now doing your second book, and it's going to be it already is on Kickstarter as well. Is it?
With the first book, I'm doing a Kickstarter campaign for the second book. It's a way of me. Obviously, I need to fund the printing of the book, so I've got a target of €15,000. And essentially, the Kickstarter is nice as well because I can offer people extra sort of gifts with the book. Like I have one option where you can have your name printed at the back of the book as a supporter of the book. I'm also offering a limited edition poster along with the book. So essentially, the campaign for the new book is live now. It's been up for 1 week. We've already raised half of the money. There's 3 weeks to go. The Kickstarter campaign is going to end on the 29th of June. And if you go to kickstarter.com and do a search for the title of the book, which is Pro Cycling Style, you'll find the campaign page, and there's, I'm describing everything that's in the book in detail. We've got interviews with ex-pro riders, designers, collectors. There's going to be a chapter on cycling in Poland. I've got specially commissioned pieces from menswear correspondents, collectors, journalists. There's a lot of stuff in there. And the thing that's going to be different with the second book is that in this book, all the jerseys are worn by the pros. There's no replicas whatsoever. I've got jerseys worn by Eddie Merckx, Francesco Moser, Saroni, De Vlaeminck, Sean Kelly, Tom Boonen, Cipollini. The list is endless. So it's a book where you're going to see jerseys all in one place that you've never seen before.
But it's not only for die-hard road racing fans, is it? What kind of people will like this as well? Apart from that, it really looks
sure. I
good
mean,
on
essentially,
the table.
that was my main thing. I said, this book is full of beautiful cycling jerseys, so I want the book as well to be a beautiful object. But the book has had a great response from people who are interested in menswear, vintage menswear, people who are interested in vintage design, typography. I kept it quite loose. For example, in the second book, I've got a specially commissioned piece by a menswear correspondent that looks at the history of the cycling jerseys used in pop music. So, for example, you have got Paul Weller. He's a fan of cycling jerseys.
Yeah,
I've come across an amazing image of the rapper Ice-T. 1986, he's wearing a Mirella Fanini cycling jersey in a press shot for his record company. And, it's an image you just wouldn't kind of believe it. He's there. He's, got his big gold chain as a gangster rapper. He's got his arms folded. He's looking mean. And he's wearing a Morella Fanini cycling jersey from 1986, which is very colourful, rainbow colours, slightly camp, but it looks fantastic on it. It looks fantastic on it. I mean, that's what's interesting for me, that these jerseys are just great objects themselves. Even to the point now, like during the rave period in the 90s, lots of kids that were going to raves, they were wearing Mappe cycling jerseys, because the Mappe jersey is a very techno kind of colourful, slightly druggy kind of design, and it spoke perfectly to them. So I think the cycling jersey, in terms of as a piece of design, has a much, much wider appeal than just outside the saddle, much wider appeal.
So as you've proven that you're able to bring books into print when you have them on Kickstarter. So when is it? When will people get their hands on it once they fund it? Once it's funded,
is with the first book. I'm essentially I've completed about half the book now. So the Kickstarter campaign will finish on the 29th of June. Then I'm going to spend another couple of months just finishing off the last pieces of content for the book. The book will be printed in September and arriving with people in October. So it makes the perfect Christmas gift.
Yeah.
Just to kind of let you know that the first book was a sellout success. Ruler magazine described it as a beautiful and enlightening book. Road CC website, they said it was one of the best books on the subject of cycling, period. So the first book had a legacy, and with the second book, I'm definitely going to be building on that. It's 200 pages. It's a coffee table book, 400 images. There's going to be a lot of content you haven't seen before. It's an absolute bargain. I mean, you go to Kickstarter, I'm doing you a favor by selling it.
Yeah, to all the listeners, yes, go to Kickstarter. And are you still there?
Yeah, okay. Kickstarter, pro cycling style. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Oliver, anything I forgot to ask you?
What's your favorite cycling jersey design? I'd like to ask you.
It is the Look jersey, the Mondrian design.
Sure. That's a fantastic piece, because you've essentially taken a piece of modern art, you've transferred it to a jersey, and it just works beautifully. I mean,
Probably I wouldn't wear it now. I wouldn't wear it on the bike, but maybe more like with like to go out or something like that. So
sure. I mean, I wear my vintage jerseys. I've got a collection. I've got around 100 jerseys. They've kind of been whittled down, and I wear them all the time when I go cycling. And people are always asking me about them. They always turn heads. And when someone is close to me and they're asking me about the jersey, the first thing they do is they reach out and they touch it. These jerseys from the 60s and 70s, they have this tactile quality, which, it just screams out, And I think the modern jerseys, they perform. The performance is fantastic in terms of a technical piece of equipment, but they don't have that tactile quality. And I think that is something that is timeless,
Well, they have, they have laser cut holes.
Sure.
No, but the having the wool is it is something different. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. But the look is a great design.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for talking to me, and I'll keep a look at your campaign. And
sure, it's there. Kickstarter.com, Pro Cycling Style.
Yeah. So thanks for talking, and have a good day.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Hans. Take care.